Welcome to Activities for Multilingual Families. It's a channel where we share ideas to help you foster your languages in a fun and compelling way. I'm Yoshito.
I'm Ute.
And I'm Anna-Elisa. In this video, we're going to talk about the game of charades and how it helps our children develop communication skills. We're also going to show you how gestures can be of great help to support even pre-verbal babies communicate their wants and needs.
In the traditional game of charades, players are divided into two teams, and each team writes on a little piece of paper a word, an expression, a title, or anything else that's decided and agreed between the two teams. The most common categories are books, films, or song titles, or famous quotes, but it can really be any category you decide and you agree. And then the players fold the papers and they put them in a box or a hat, and they give all the papers to the other team. Then each team decides on a player who is going to pick the papers and make their teammates guess what's on the paper. You can of course put a timer on and decide, for example, that in 3 minutes you need to make your teammates guess as many papers. And then we see in each team who has guessed the most words. Like adults, children know more words related to one subject than the other, purely because they are more exposed to certain contexts in one language than the other one. So for example, if our children are used to go to the zoo, farms with us, they might know many names of animals in our languages. However, if, for example, in school they studied space, but we don't really talk about it in our language, they might be lacking that vocabulary. So when we choose categories to play charades, it's very important to take that into consideration. Competitive games can be very fun and motivating, but it can be also very frustrating for players who feel that they are at a disadvantage compared to the others for whatever reason. So to go around this, we can make this game more collaborative. We have different ways to do that. So for example, you can decide that every player is going to take a turn to pick one word or expression out of the hat and make the others guess. You can also decide to time it and see how long it takes for everybody to have a go. Or decide on a fixed amount of time, for example 5 minutes, and see how many words can be guessed. You can also decide that some players are allowed to have help from others to make the expression more clearer for the others to guess. The charade game is an excellent learning opportunity. You can use this game to reinforce certain aspects of the language that your child is not very secure about. So I'm going to give you a few tips for that. The first one is to have little gestures for some small words like articles. For example, in French, we have articles that are masculine, those that are feminine, and this can be tricky for children to remember. So you can decide that this is going to be un, masculine, but when it's feminine, you're going to do une. Un, une. Masculine, feminine, article. And to reinforce the syntax of the sentence, you can show how many words there are in this expression. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 words. And this is going to help your child remember these small words that they might forget when they just speak normally. Charades don't need to be played with only the vocabulary our children are secure with. We can use this opportunity to reinforce the knowledge of the new words they've seen, new expressions they've learned, and idiomatic expressions can be quite fun to explore.
Claire, glaire,
Regarde.
regarder,
Chercher.
chercher,
Non. Avec les yeux.
œil,
Oh, il a vu un truc.
vue,
A vu.
de nez.
Nez.
Mais c'est ça que j'ai dit.
Oui, c'est ça.
Vue du nez.
We can use different gestures to decompose a long word, or making an idiomatic expression very explicit can be quite fun. We can use, for example, homophones to decompose a long word, or to make it more explicit. And all these gestures used are going to help your child remember better this new expression.
Cinq mots. Donne. Un. Coup. Deux. Cinq. Main. Donne. Un coup de main. Donne un coup de main.
Ouais, c'est quoi donner un coup de main? Mais non. Un coup de main, oui, un coup de main, ça veut dire on aide. On aide. And here's my third tip. If you want to make the game slightly easier, you can allow sound effects and onomatopoeia.
Trois.
mots.
Bête.
Bête, ouais.
Lait.
C'est du lait.
Bête. Lait.
Explosion. Saute. Un rond. Une bombe. Comme ça. Comme ça. Ça explose. Pète les bombes. Il fait n'importe quoi. Il est fou. Il est fou. T'es fou.
Bête. Lait.
Ah, c'est quoi qu'on dit quand on est fou? On pète les... Oui. So feel free to adapt the rules to your child's needs, and remember that the main thing is to make the game enjoyable. So provide enough support and avoid anything that can lead to frustration.
You can also play charades using a mix of different languages. For example, one team writes the words in one language and the other team has to act it out and guess in another language. This should be agreed on beforehand. When guessing the title of a movie, for example, it can be interesting to explore how the movie's title changes across languages. So, for example, the Christmas classic Home Alone turns into Mi pobre angelito, my poor little angel in Spanish, and Mamma ho perso l'aereo, Mom, I missed the plane in Italian. Similar in French, Maman, j'ai raté l'avion, and Esqueceram gemim, they forgot about me in Portuguese. You can use Google Translate if someone doesn't know the term in the language of the game yet. And body language in general are part of nonverbal communication, and we all use nonverbal ways to communicate no matter whether we already speak or not. Here is an interesting fact. 55% of our communication is made non-verbally. 38% is vocal, so through tone, pace, and inflection, and 7% is verbal. From day one, we communicate with our surroundings through eye contact, facial expressions, body movements, posture, gestures. It is therefore very natural to encourage gestures to promote our children's overall communication development. They allow our children to express themselves before even being able to articulate words like Anna-Elisa will show you in a moment. Gestures convey meaning and compensate for speech difficulties when learning a new language. So, for example, by shaking our head or nodding, we want to convey clear messages like yes or no. Although there can be differences in body language across cultures and languages about these two words. Or when we want to signalize before and after, or before and after, we use our hands. Same goes for the gesture like this, or for I don't know, I don't understand. Especially when we learn a new language, we might heavily lean on our body language before we start using words. Facial expressions are then very important too. although these also can change from culture to culture. So a smile, for example, is not always expression of agreement and joy. I link to my post about this in the description. When gestures are linked to spoken words and concepts, they can help memorizing words easier. Children use gestures to refer to objects before they produce labels for the objects, and gesture-speech combinations to convey semantic relations between objects before conveying sentences and speech. Furthermore, children who grow up with a deaf parent and are since day one exposed to sign language and oral language, for example, are used to this bimodal or multilingual communication from very early on. They switch from one way to communicate to the other or combine them in a very natural way.
Gestures in body language like pointing, waving to say bye-bye, clapping hands when excited, lifting arms to be picked up, or stomping when upset are used by young children all over the world, across cultures, to express what they want, to refer to things, and to share their experiences. Using gestures is something we naturally teach our children, and by doing so we facilitate early communication. As they grow, we can encourage them to use common gestures by using gestures ourselves when we speak. For example, where? I don't know. Yes? No. Stop. Another tool that might be interesting for multilingual families is baby sign language, which is a set of gestures that represent ideas. For example, milk, eat, more, book. Babies can learn gestures like these even before they learn to speak, so they have an extra tool to communicate, which might reduce frustration and enhance communication. Here's another example.
One of the tools that we use with the infant communication method is baby sign language. This is like the main thing. And my favorite sign to use with babies is I love you. This is how we sign it. Love, le for love. It looks like L, right? The first letter of love. That's how you can remember it. Use one hand and you sign I love you. And you can use this with your baby from birth all the way up till, but it's the sign you'll probably use the most when they're teenagers and you want to shout, I love you across the room. Yeah, don't do that. Sign love, love. I love you.
If you'd like to know more about infant communication or baby sign language, watch this conversation between Uta and Roya Cavilla. Gestures are part of the natural development of spoken language. In hearing children, gestures and language develop in interaction if they are used together. That's why it's so important that we make a connection between gestures and the words we use, which the children will learn to understand and to use themselves. In this process between nonverbal to verbal communication with babies and toddlers, it's very important that we always accompany our gestures with words. For example, if our children point at a banana because they would like to eat it, we could say, "Do you want to eat a banana?" They might nod, they might shake their heads, they might stomp. While helping them reach the banana or giving it to them, we could repeat the words banana and eat in different sentences, in different ways. If they don't respond or acknowledge your words, you can try to get their attention by changing your intonation or repeating the word in a funny way, like banana, banana. With time, children will start using words as well as gestures to communicate what they think, what they want, and what they need. During this transition, we should stay patient and calm because every child develops at their own pace. We might need to repeat words more frequently or over a longer period of time until our children start trying to say them, but they will all get there at the end.
every language has its own gestures. Sometimes languages have similar gestures, and it can be very interesting to explore how many gestures our languages have in common. But the same way we can find words in other languages that sound similar but have different meanings, we can also find the same kind of gestures across languages with different meanings. Especially when all our languages differ considerably with regards to the use of gestures and their meanings, we may want to explore their use in order to avoid misunderstandings and awkward and sometimes unpleasant situations.
How do you use gestures and sounds in your family? Do your children like to play charades? If you have any questions or comments about this activity, make sure to comment below and let us know.
And if you like what we share here, please click subscribe and click the bell to be notified every time we publish a new video.
Have fun with the languages!